Scenes of horror in Ukraine as the withdrawal of Russian troops reveals hundreds of dead civilians left behind. Catholic reaction from the Pope, from the head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, and from the Director General of EWTN Ukraine.
It's been a tough road here in Vermont on the political level in the State House. Even though I have a lot of constituents who support me and are pro-life, here in the State House that's not the case.
A leader in the Vermont pro-life movement talks about the difficulty of fighting for the unborn in a state some label the most pro-abortion state in the country. We conclude our reporting series, Life After Roe, Debate in the States, with a reporter roundtable sharing our key takeaways.
As it is now 2 years since we've been able to offer an experience like this for pilgrims and museum visitors.
As COVID subsides in Italy, we take you on a train ride to show you what's just opened up.
It's tempting to want to prioritize profit over moral investing. How do you address this?
And as markets continue to fluctuate, we speak with an expert financial advisor from the Knights of Columbus on how to keep the faith where your money is. EWTN News In Depth starts now.
Di altri paesi, brutali combattimenti nelle strade.
We thought that invasions of other countries, savage fighting in the streets, and atomic threats were a grim memory of the past. But the cold wind of war, which brings just death, destruction, and hate, violently tore down everyone and everyday life.
Pope Francis makes his strongest statement yet on the war in Ukraine, spoken while on the international stage during his visit to Malta. And as the scope of the atrocities became more apparent this week, with the continued release of images of murdered civilians, the Pope spoke out again during his weekly general audience, holding up a war-stained flag of Ukraine that Pope Francis said came from the martyred city of Bucha. He criticized what he called the impotence of organizations like the United Nations to stop the war. The Catholic world responds to the atrocities committed against Ukrainian civilians. The extent of that horror was revealed in video released after Russian soldiers withdrew from towns near the capital city of Kyiv. The images are difficult to watch, but necessary to illustrate the scope of potential war crime charges. If you do not want to see them, look away and only listen for the next minute. The scenes from the town of Bucha near Kyiv have horrified people around the globe. The bodies of civilians dumped in a mass grave dug behind a church. Bodies of people executed in the streets, lying uncovered, many with their hands tied behind their backs. Satellite images taken before the Russians withdrew show the mass grave and the bodies, refuting Russian claims that the atrocity was staged by Ukrainians after the Russians left. Residents who lived through this nightmare told reporters about being terrorized.
Що там десь зривна волна пішла чи ні? Це розстрілювали. Просто розстрілювали.
One man says all the people in the mass grave were shot dead. He says he personally saw the bullet holes. Another says the soldiers just started shooting at them for no reason, and that many of the bodies were left on the street on purpose so that victims' relatives would have to deal with them. A woman told reporters the soldiers came to kill. She said she was so scared. She was forced to live in her basement for more than a month because she was too afraid to come out. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelinskyi toured several areas near Kyiv to view the devastation and scenes of human suffering. Russians destroyed this major bridge along a main highway leaving the city. In Bucha, the site of those horrible acts of brutality, he told reporters he wants the world to see what happened and to show that the victims were civilians. Zelinskyi warned there will be other towns like Bucha where atrocities and war crimes will be discovered, not to mention the number of dead who will be found under the rubble of civilian targets. Zelinskyi took his message to the United Nations on Tuesday.
Я звертаюсь до вас від імені народу, який щоденно вшановує пам'ять загиблих.
The Ukrainian president criticized the United Nations Security Council for being unable to provide security and peace. He showed a gruesome video of dead bodies and challenged diplomats to take bold action. And he called for Russia to be removed as a member of the UN's Human Rights Council. The United States ambassador to the UN agreed with Zelinskyi, saying Russia should not have a position of authority in a body that promotes respect for human rights.
Spending Russia from the Human Rights Council is something we, collectively have the power to do in the General Assembly. Our votes can make a real difference. Russia's participation on the Human Rights Council hurts the Council's credibility. It undermines the entire UN, and it is just plain wrong.
The Russian ambassador to the UN called the discussion anti-Russian hysteria. The head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church has denounced what he calls the horrific war crimes committed by Russian forces near Kyiv. Referring to images of the widespread atrocities, Major Archbishop Sviatoslav Shevchuk says Europe saw such scenes only during Nazi liberation in World War II. He said it's important that the whole world sees and hears about it. Shevchuk called for an end to the aggression and bloodshed. We're joined now by the Director General of EWTN Ukraine, Father Oleksandr Zelinskyi. And we have checked in with him several times over the last few weeks, but this is the first opportunity EWTN News In Depth has had to talk to him since the world has learned of the widespread mass killings of innocent civilians. Father, we're all horrified at the images of Ukrainians brutalized and murdered by Russian troops. How can we, as religious people of faith, make sense of this nightmare?
Yes, this was really sad for us, for Ukrainians, and for I think that for whole world to see what was happened near the Kiev in Bucha, and also. First of all, it's not only in this town, it's in the different places in Ukraine. We can hear about some of the crimes, war crimes. It's really difficult to see and to say how these soldiers, these Russian soldiers, how this happened, how horrible is for us. Yes, it's situation is not easy, but we try to trust in God. We try to believe that God is with us and that He will help us to defend our land.
Father, I don't know what the reaction of your parishioners to these atrocities might be, but as a priest, what have you done and what can you do to comfort them as they see these terrible, terrible things?
Mm-hmm. Yes, we as church, we have this special mission in this time of war. We try to be with people. Many priests try to be with people, to help them in different ways, also through humanitarian help, but also through prayers. And also we as EWTN Ukraine, as television, try to broadcast every day masses, prayers, catechesis, also different interviews.
As the war stretches on, do President Zelensky's global appeals and nightly addresses to the nation matter to the people? Do you have a sense that they're losing hope?
It's sad for us as for Ukrainians to see that some of the people in the world, some of the countries don't understand the situation. They believe in some lies, which especially Russia tries to spread in different media, and we see this unity between people in Ukraine. We see today this very big motivation to defend our country, our dignity, our freedom. Yes, we also remember and we also try to pray for, as Jesus said, for our enemies, for conversion of Russia, for conversion of enemies, because it's also our duty as Christians to pray, to try to pray. It's not easy for people. It's not easy also for us as priests to say, people, pray for those who not want to do good for you,
persecute you,
who do some evil, but it's not easy for people, but it's also our mission to try to help, to pray for enemies, to have this freedom also in our heart.
That's right. And Father, I know it seems like a long time ago, but it was just 2 weeks. What was the impact on the faithful in Ukraine of the global consecration of Russia and Ukraine to our Blessed Mother?
Mm-hmm. It was very important even for us as Ukrainians. We also broadcasted in Ukraine in EWTN Ukraine, and we saw a very big interest among the people, especially Catholics. But I really believe that this God's grace can change the hearts, the wills of different people, that God can provide us through these moments, and He will help us, and His mother, our Mother Mary, will help us in ways that we don't know sometimes.
Thank you so much, Father. We're praying for you.
Thank you very much.
Our prayers go out to all those suffering through this humanitarian crisis. Next, a conclusion to our reporting series, Life After Roe, Debate in the States. EWTN News In Depth will be right back.
A proposed amendment to the state constitution backed by Planned Parenthood has Vermont Right to Life very concerned. I'm Mark Irons with what Vermont voters have to say coming up.
The pro-life fight continues in a state some say is the least likely to protect the unborn. That report, plus our reporter roundtable. Key takeaways from our correspondents who traveled the country to explore what happens next if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade.
Whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, there are good reasons to oppose this amendment.
In a state that already has unrestricted access to abortion, the proposed Reproductive Liberty Amendment in Vermont could add even more legal protections for ending the life of the unborn. Welcome back to EWTN News In Depth. Today, we conclude our 6-part series, Life After Roe, Debate in the States, as we look ahead at what might happen around the country if the Supreme Court overturns or severely limits Roe v. Wade in a ruling later this spring in the Dobbs case. Our team of reporters, Mark Irons, Catherine Hadro, and Teresa Tomio, traveled the country to look at 6 diverse states whose legislatures would each take a different path if abortion laws are now determined at the state level.
I think it's because Maryland is the original Catholic colony that Maryland has been so targeted by pro-death policies, including abortion.
We began our reporting in Maryland. Though a state with a rich Catholic history, it's one of only 4 states, along with Washington, New York, and Hawaii, that voluntarily funds abortion through taxpayer money.
Discussion was opened again to look at what Roe v. Wade could possibly be overturned. I wanted to make sure that Florida was in a position to be able to protect the children here in this state.
In Florida, politics are changing. Though the state's constitutional right to privacy has long been a roadblock to the pro-life movement, State Senator Kelly Stargell recently introduced a 15-week abortion ban that passed the Senate. Governor Ron DeSantis is expected to sign it into law any week.
It was the 1846 law and the 1931 laws here in Michigan which protected me, no exceptions. And I literally owe my birth to those laws which protected me because my birth mother's choice was to abort me at the time.
As pro-life attorney Rebecca Kiesling told us, Michigan presents a unique situation. It's one of a small handful of states whose state constitutions ban abortion. If federal abortion protections are overturned, Michigan would revert back to its pre-Roe status, and abortion would be outlawed automatically.
Well, I absolutely would attribute it to the faith of the legislators, but the faith of the citizens of the state of Tennessee.
In the heart of the Bible Belt, Tennessee evangelicals bolster the Catholic emphasis on protecting life. The state has passed some of the nation's most pro-life legislative measures, including a trigger law that would automatically ban abortion if Roe is overturned, except in cases in which the mother's life is in danger.
Here in California, our governor and state legislators have said that they would like to make California a sanctuary state for women seeking an abortion.
But a big challenge to the pro-life movement in California. Pushing the abortion sanctuary idea, Governor Gavin Newsom signed a new law in March, making abortions cheaper. Copays and deductibles are eliminated for people on private insurance plans. But no matter what the political differences in each state, whether leaning pro-life or pro-abortion, we found a common theme.
I just think this is really what the Catholic Church calls us to do with the pro-life movement.
The need to help women in crisis pregnancies and give them the support they need to care for their child.
It goes back to being able to assist her with housing, a job, schooling, whatever it is that her needs are.
And now, our final state, Vermont. Already ranked as the state with the least amount of protection for unborn children, Vermont could take it even one step further with an amendment to its state constitution on the ballot this fall. Reporter Mark Irons is just back from Montpelier, Vermont.
Natural beauty abounds here in the Green Mountain State. According to a 2021 CNBC survey, Vermont is the most welcoming state and best place to live, ranked #1 among the 50 states. But look closer. Are all people here truly welcomed and even given a chance to live?
There's just no regard for the life of an unborn child at any stage of development here in this state. And it's really appalling.
For decades, Sharon Toborg, a policy analyst with Vermont Right to Life, has been tracking legislation coming out of the Vermont State Capitol building in Montpelier, just down the street from her office. Some laws have changed as the seasons come and go, but one thing has remained.
Since 1972, we've had unrestricted abortion throughout pregnancy here in Vermont.
Throughout all 9 months?
Throughout all 9 months.
To put that in perspective, Toborg says most states, including places like California and New York, have at least some regulations on the books regarding abortion. Vermont has none. It may come as no surprise that in another survey, this one by Americans United for Life, ranking the 50 states with the most protections for unborn children, Vermont comes in last place.
There's just no movement whatsoever to be more pro-life.
Pro-life state representative Republican Vicki Strong has tried to propose some basic measures in the State House, like the need for abortion facilities to meet certain standards or a requirement for parental consent before a minor can obtain an abortion. But she hasn't had success.
All of those bills get a number and a name and they go to a committee, but the committee will never take those bills up.
Pro-lifers say Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider, has a strong influence on state politics. The current Vermont Speaker of the House, Jill Krowinski, was a former high-ranking employee of the organization.
Vermont actually has the most Planned Parenthoods per capita in the United States.
Toborg says recent numbers show Planned Parenthood administers 90% of the state's abortions. And though Vermont is one of the least populous states, there were 1,195 abortions in 2019. There is help for women in crisis pregnancies. Vermont has 9 pro-life pregnancy resource centers compared to 10 abortion facilities.
Hey, hey, ho, ho, Roe v. Wade has got to go!
But even if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade this year, allowing individual states to decide how to regulate abortion, there won't be any change in Vermont. State law has already secured unrestricted access.
We will pass Prop 5.
And now pro-abortion lawmakers want to go a step further by adding Proposal 5, being called the Reproductive Liberty Amendment, to the Vermont State Constitution.
And I can think of no better way to show our commitment to personal reproductive liberty and justice than a constitutional amendment.
The proposed amendment reads that an individual's right to personal reproductive autonomy is central to the liberty and dignity to determine one's own life course and shall not be denied or infringed unless justified by a compelling state interest achieved by the least restrictive means. Prop 5 is going on the ballot this fall, and Vermont voters will have the final say if it gets added to the state constitution.
It doesn't really say anything. It says a lot, but it doesn't say anything. There's very little specific about it.
Bishop Christopher Coyne of the Diocese of Burlington says the Prop 5 language is intentionally vague and was crafted to leave out the word abortion.
They're not going to include the word abortion because they know if they do, they open up It's like you're opening up a veil. You're taking a veil away on what they're actually trying to do.
The Diocese of Burlington covers the entire state of Vermont, and the Catholic Church, alongside groups like Vermont Right to Life, is now trying to educate voters on what Proposal 5 is and what it could do.
The purpose is to enshrine abortion rights in the Vermont Constitution so that Vermont's statute that guarantees abortion throughout pregnancy cannot be changed.
It turns out making unrestricted, unregulated abortion access a permanent fixture for the future of Vermont may not even be what people want. A 2020 poll from Vermonters for Good Government shows although 67% of the state considers itself pro-choice, more than 50% of the population favors some kind of abortion restrictions, such as parental consent for minors, safety regulations for abortion clinics, or the requirement to inform women about alternatives to seeking abortion. Proposal 5 does not include any of those measures, and the amendment text is being criticized as well. Besides not mentioning abortion, it doesn't mention women, only an individual's right to personal reproductive autonomy that shall not be denied or infringed unless justified by a compelling state interest. Could unethical practices and interpretations follow?
It talks about reproductive rights, so to speak. What does that mean? It can mean anything as the future unfolds. So it just opens the door, in my mind, to a Pandora's box of unlimited types of scenarios that aren't even thought of yet.
Personal reproductive autonomy.
We took a printout of the proposed amendment language out on the streets and asked Vermonters if they would support it.
I would vote against this, probably. Why? It's just confusing.
Most people didn't want to speak on camera, but we did hear from a few.
I am very much in favor of personal autonomy, especially for women and anyone in a reproductive situation.
If I saw this on the ballot, I would probably not vote on it because I would need some more clarification because I don't understand what it's asking me.
Maybe this unclear language is meant to sort of make it more appealing to a broader section of voters.
So now the work to educate voters on Proposal 5 ramps up here in the Green Mountain State.
Whether you're pro-choice or pro-life, there are good reasons to oppose this amendment.
It would prevent any future legislation. So people need to just know the truth.
This is just a bad law. It's not just about because it allows for abortion without restrictions, which is already there anyways. It's a bad law because it allows for so many other possibilities.
Mark Irons, EWTN News in Depth.
The alarming proposal of the so-called Reproductive Liberty Amendment is facing opposition on a grassroots level from Vermonters for Good, an organization mentioned in Mark's piece. The organization says most Vermonters are against Prop 5. Anissa Lamberton, the spokesperson for Vermonters for Good, joins us to discuss. Anissa, thank you for being here with us. Tell us about your organization and why Proposition 5 or Article 22 in Vermont is so harmful.
Hello. Vermonters for Good Government is a grassroots organization, and our vision, our mission is to educate Vermonters about the harm, the potential harm that this constitutional amendment could have for generations. We're trying to educate and we're trying to bring together like-minded individuals who recognize that this amendment is not something that is needed. We know that in Vermont, abortion is legal, and it's legal through all 9 months. And we also know, and we've heard from Vermonters throughout the state, that abortion up to the time of birth is not something that Vermonters want. However, the proponents of this amendment, Article 22, Proposition 5, have told Vermonters, if they even know about this proposal, they have told Vermonters that it is needed if Roe v. Wade is overturned. And so they're creating a bait and switch because they're saying that we need this in case the courts overrule your rights. However, when asked about this amendment, we are told again and again that the courts would interpret this. At Vermonters for Good Government, we want the people to be able to go to the voting booth in November and know what they're voting on. And that is not the case with this Proposition 5.
So, Anissa, you're trying to inform voters. What else does this bill do aside from dealing with abortion?
Well, that is something that is unknown. And what I can say to you is that in committee, one of the sponsoring senators, Jenny Lyons, was asked to put abortion wording into the proposition, into the article. And she said no, that they wanted a broader language so that it would allow for Supreme Court interpretation for anything coming up in the future. We don't know what that future might hold. We do know that we have Vermont expert testimony by people such as Norm Smith Esquire, who has posited that this could mean designer babies, human embryo trafficking. It could also mean whatever your reproductive freedom, autonomy is to you, such as far, sadly, as pedophilia or prostitution. They're trying to make prostitution legal in Vermont now. And all of these things could be something in the future, things that we don't even know about. And if we look to Ukraine and we see what is happening with the surrogates there and the children that have been left behind and the whole commodification of women and children in utero, that is not something that we want here. We do not want Vermont to be a sanctuary state for abortion, for surrogacy, for producing a late-term infant for research. We don't know what the future could hold. But we do know that one of our representatives, Ann Donahue, has asked the legislature to consider the eugenics issue here, that we don't know what in the future we might be asked to apologize for or be asked to pay reparations for, because this is open-ended, broad, and unknown.
Because of what it might do to minorities. Anissa, this move to amend the Constitution has process issues that you've brought up. Can you explain what the process issues are with this amendment?
Well, from my perspective, one of the process issues is simply that the first part of bringing up Proposition 5, and we had 2 votes, the House, the Senate, then it went back to the House, and all of this was done during a time of COVID. And the people really did not have a voice. There was also an issue where the people were allowed to give testimony, and the option to testify was opened and closed, with giving 2-to-1 for the proponents for Proposition 5 to those who were opposed. And that is something that has not happened before. We have always left signing up to be able to give testimony until both sides had an equal voice. I've been in the State House and testified in the past, and they picked 40 or so out of one line and 40 or so out of the other line, pro and con, and had us go back and forth. And that's not the way it happened in testimony. We had 2 proponents for everyone who was opposed. And the people here did not have a voice.
So it seemed that the debate was lopsided. Well, thank you so much, Anissa, for clarifying for us. We look forward to watching this carefully. And as we conclude this series, our correspondents join me now to talk about key takeaways from their reporting. Mark, Teresa, Catherine, the landscape has changed over the past 6 weeks as you've come on our show to profile the issue of abortion in specific states. Florida, West Virginia, Kentucky, and Arizona have all moved on 15-week abortion bans in their legislative sessions. Idaho has imposed a 6-week ban in the style of the Texas law, covered in headlines for weeks. Teresa, you know this issue well. You've covered it extensively. The actions are heating up on both sides. While states like Oklahoma pass laws to protect life, pro-abortion leadership is pushing public funding of abortion in Rhode Island and abortion until birth in Colorado. It seems no one is waiting for a decision from the Supreme Court to move on this issue. Are you seeing this same trend?
Yeah, absolutely, Montse, and thank you so much. Yeah, I think it's happening, and what it's causing people to do, though, I think on both sides of the aisle, is to come forward and get involved in some real activism. And I'm very proud of our pro-life leaders in Michigan because they're not sitting back. The left is pushing forward, as we reported here on EWTN News In Depth, with this reproductive freedom for all issue where they're trying to enshrine abortion in the Constitution through a petition drive to put this on the ballot in November here in Michigan. But pro-life leaders are very active, and they form their own coalition, and they're not waiting either. They're moving forward, and they're reaching out through the Catholic Church, through Protestant pro-life organizations, through pregnancy resource centers, and major other pro-life groups such as Right to Life of Michigan, and really getting out there one-on-one on the streets to make a difference.
So you're seeing a diverse coalition come together. That's good to hear. Of the states we covered in our series, Tennessee has had the biggest developments. Pulling its Texas-style 6-week abortion ban, Tennessee is now pursuing a ban on medical abortions and mail-in order pills, as many in the U.S. and abroad pledge to continue to mail and prescribe pills regardless of state laws. Mark, did you get a sense for this when you were there in Tennessee, that the future is in regulating medical abortions rather than surgical abortions?
Absolutely, Montse, and this is going to have to be the future of the pro-life movement as they think about trying to regulate this. I mean, if you look at the numbers now, almost half, 40% of abortions in the country are taking place through medication rather than surgery. So it's good to see a place like Tennessee, one of the most pro-life states, get out ahead of this. Remember, this is a procedure that's, people say it's simple and it's easy and it's safe. It's complicated and dangerous. You see women who go and receive these pills and have abortions this way, they're more likely to be at risk of going back to the hospital because of complications. So Tennessee, along with other states, are proposing this sort of legislation. We're seeing it being done in Arkansas, Arizona, and Texas. During COVID, this was definitely a time, I think, when Planned Parenthood and other abortion providers were trying this out to see if this could be the new way. And it looks like it's already been trending that direction. So I think as we consider how abortion should be regulated going forward, you have to pay attention to medical abortion.
Using COVID as the excuse to provide medical abortion delivery systems online. We definitely did see that. Catherine, I know that you've reported both on medical abortion issues, but also on how the courts affect the abortion issue. Florida reflects the state of play in the judiciary at the local level. Lawsuits over conflicts between state and federal regulations on abortion are the reason we have this Supreme Court challenge we're talking about. But does the future hold internal challenges at state Supreme Courts?
In short, yes. I mean, let's continue with that Florida example. 3 of the justices currently sitting on the Florida State Supreme Court bench were appointed by Governor DeSantis. And because of that, pro-life leaders in Florida have this new hope and optimism that now the state's constitutional right to privacy will be ruled on and decided differently when it pertains to abortion. And this is just one state and one state Supreme Court battle, which is why, Montse, I've been so grateful for this series, because it's a reminder for us all, as we in the pro-life movement have put so much attention into reversing Roe v. Wade, that if and when that happens, that's not going to be the end of the abortion battle. In fact, that's going to be the beginning in many cases and in many states and in many state Supreme Court battles.
Absolutely. And you definitely featured that faith was a big part of this. The new Chief Justice in Florida, Carlos Muñiz, is Catholic. Yes. Does that come into play as well?
I mean, I think a lot of people are hopeful that it will, especially because Governor DeSantis has promised to appoint, only pro-life justices in a very similar fashion that we saw at the federal level with President Trump appointing 3 justices to the Supreme Court. So I think that will come into play. At least a lot of Catholics are hopeful that it will.
Mark, gender-affirming care or transgender transition treatments is being conflated with abortion in California, Vermont, and Maryland. Are you seeing the focus of these bills change from abortions for women to abortions for all people or birthing people? How does this change the debate?
I have in 2 of the states we covered, in Maryland and Vermont. In Maryland, you have a Pregnant Persons Act, and in Vermont, they're trying to get a constitutional amendment that says an individual's right to reproductive liberty. So a woman is being stripped from this issue that's often seen as a woman's right to choose. And I was talking with Laura Bogley. She's the legislative director of Maryland Right to Life this morning. She says this is a diversion. She says that she believes women are growing lukewarm on this idea of abortion. So what's Planned Parenthood doing, the nation's #1 abortion provider? They're trying to find other angles to bring people in, to broaden that audience. And so they're saying reproductive rights are transgender rights in the hopes that they'll get more people keyed into this issue. But we're definitely seeing this more and more. And the people I spoke to say, hey, when you strip somebody of their identity, then you are more likely to take that next step and strip them of rights. That's the rights of an unborn child and a woman.
Stripping them of life. Teresa, in your profile of Michigan, the issue of race targeting came up. There's a new lawsuit in Alabama, the home of EWTN, that cites racial discrimination against the Black community, alleging the abortion industry is deliberately targeting racial minorities. What can you tell us about this claim?
Well, that actually has been the history of Planned Parenthood and the abortion industry in this country. If you look at Planned Parenthood and its founder, Margaret Sanger, the largest organization arm of Planned Parenthood in New York, had to admit this a few years ago. They were called out for it. And they're now saying, well, yes, that's true, but we're trying to get away from it. They're famous for saying one thing and doing the exact opposite. They claim that they're all about supporting minorities, and yet they are targeting African Americans and Hispanics. Number one, African American. Number two, Hispanic communities, because what they do is they look for locations in those heavily African American communities, populated communities by African Americans or Hispanic Americans. We see that right here in Southeast Michigan. Along 8 Mile Road, we have several major abortion facilities, and they are amongst the community right there. So the targeting continues despite what Planned Parenthood says, and also the numbers back that up, whether it's the CDC or the Guttmacher Institute. We know that some 17 million plus minority babies have lost their lives at the hands of abortionists in this country since Roe v. Wade. So Planned Parenthood says that they care so much about minority communities, but yet they have a hand in wiping out those minority communities.
More minorities affected than anyone else. California has made it clear, absolutely. California has made it clear that it wants to be an abortion sanctuary. I know that all of you have heard this term, abortion sanctuary. Catherine, aside from the focus on the legal and policy protections for life that we've all discussed, what else can be done to protect life? And how is the church leading, particularly in California, as you reported, on that front?
You know, one thing that someone told me was that parish leaders are really the first responders when it comes to the abortion crisis in California. And isn't that true? It's a reminder that so many families and women who are seeking abortions are mothers already and are sitting in our parish pews. So that is why parish leaders need to be equipped with information so they can be the bridge between the resources available and these women who are in need, whether that's pregnancy centers or state funds available for them. One example I want to give is there's a statistic that shocked me. More than 5,000 pregnant women experience homelessness every single year in LA County alone. So the LA Archdiocese has done something beautiful. They donated a convent that is no longer in use to a group Harvest Home that has a mission to house these pregnant women. I think that's a beautiful example of how the church is leading on life outside of simply advocating and lobbying for pro-life policy.
Absolutely. Not only focusing on birth, but focusing on the women and the families that need our support. I want to thank the three of you for being a part of this series, for bringing to light these important issues, and for following this as we continue to look out for what comes next from the Supreme Court. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Montse.
To see our full coverage from prior weeks on the states of Maryland, Florida, Michigan, Tennessee, and California, check out our EWTN News In Depth YouTube and social media pages, including Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Next, the Supreme Court gets a new justice, and Pope Francis encourages the world to embrace the immigrant. The Week in Review is right after this break.
We've been managing money for a long, long time.
And later, how Catholics can keep Christian values in their stock portfolios.
I'm really excited. It's my first time I've ever actually been here. I've never been to Rome.
And we step on board the Papal Express. We're off to see something that's been close to the public for 2 full years. News about the Supreme Court tops the Week in Review. Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson is on her way to becoming the first black woman to serve on the highest court in the land. It comes after the Senate voted on Monday 53-47 to advance her nomination. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer had to call the vote to break a deadlock because the Judiciary Committee voted 11-11 on advancing the nomination. Every Senate Democrat voted to advance Jackson's nomination, as did 3 Republican senators who split from party lines: Susan Collins, Lisa Murkowski, and Mitt Romney.
In the prior confirmation, I was concerned that she was outside the mainstream. And as a result of our meeting for an hour together and reviewing her testimony before Congress, I became convinced that she's within the mainstream. She's also a highly qualified, intelligent, capable person, and I wish her the very best.
Jackson will be replacing retiring Justice Stephen Breyer, for whom she clerked at the High Court. He will step down at the end of the current term. United Nations climate scientists warned this week that we're headed for an unlivable world if greenhouse gas emissions don't fall faster than countries have committed to in the Paris Accord. Governments agreed to keep global warming below 2 degrees Celsius this century. Temperatures have already increased by more than 1.1 degrees since pre-industrial times. That, the scientists say, has resulted in extreme weather, including flash floods, more intense hurricanes, and extreme heat. The focus was on immigration during Pope Francis's trip to Malta, which EWTN News In Depth previewed for you last week. As we mentioned at the top of this program, he also passionately denounced the war in Ukraine. In a country that is 85% Catholic, the pontiff was greeted by enthusiastic crowds. During his meetings with Maltese leaders, Francis appealed to them to safeguard the dignity of the thousands of refugees who have arrived on the island's shores. The pontiff visited St. Paul's Grotto, where tradition says the apostle lived and preached during the months he was shipwrecked on the island. He also listened to the testimony of migrants who had made the dangerous sea trip to Malta, as he also remembered the current plight of Ukrainian refugees.
Pensare a quelle de migliaia e migliaia di persone.
Your experiences make us think, too, of the experiences of all those thousands and thousands of people who in these very days have been forced to flee Ukraine because of the unfair and savage war, but also the experiences of so many women and men in Asia, Africa, and the Americas who have had to leave their homes and lands in search of safety.
During the visit, Francis also spoke about the importance of welcoming people fleeing poverty and conflict after he took a ferry from Malta's main port of Valletta to nearby island Gozo. That's where he prayed with thousands of Catholics at the Tapinu Sanctuary. The Holy See press office says Pope Francis is considering a visit to Lebanon after a tweet by Lebanese President Michel Aoun earlier this week stating the Pope was expected to visit the Middle Eastern country in June. Aoun, a Maronite Catholic, visited the Holy Father at the Vatican on March 22nd. Francis has expressed a desire to travel to Lebanon several times, but no official confirmation has yet been announced. The iconic Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris can now be seen as it's never been seen before in a new augmented reality exhibition. Since the massive fire that damaged much of the historic building in 2019, the landmark has been shut to the public with few rare exceptions. This exhibition, which took a year to bring to fruition, allows visitors to explore scenes on tablets, spanning from the construction of the foundations in 1165 to today's renovation. Each scene was created from history books, paintings, and the photos of the building. They all contain interactive elements to learn more about its history.
What we are proposing as an experience here is to travel in the past, but not as a passive, a passive traveler, as someone who interacts with the environment, as an active traveler in the past.
The exhibition will travel to 12 capitals until 2024, starting with the National Building Museum in Washington, D.C., beginning April 15th. Up next, investing your nest egg with Christian values in mind. We'll talk to the expert right after this. We all want to grow our investments, have a good nest egg for ourselves and our families. But how do you find companies that invest in that and that follow Catholic teaching? There are financial companies that specialize in moral faith-based investing. In this Catholic Life report, we spoke to a leader in the field, the president of Knights of Columbus Asset Advisors, Tony Monopoly. Tony, the Knights of Columbus they're leaders in charitable help. They're leaders in insurance, of course. Why are they now leaders in investing?
Well, it's interesting because the mutual funds that we're becoming more known for date back to 2014. So we have an over 6-year track record, and that's pretty long. But the Knights of Columbus as an insurance company and as an investor, we date back well over a century. The order is 140 years old. As an insurance company of what you would think of as an actuarially based insurance company, we do have records dating back to 1901. So we've been managing money for a long, long time. And really the impetus to create this third-party business, if you will, to manage money for other people, came out of saying, hey, we've been pretty successful managing our own portfolio, and we really do believe that a lot of the things that we do are of service to the church. And we thought if we could bring the investment engine that has helped the Knights become as successful as it is and help bring it to Catholic institutions and individuals, it was really one more service that we can bring, and we have long, incredible track records.
I understand you've been on multiple networks discussing this new trend of faith-based investing. And we've also heard a different acronym, ESG. ESG, environment, social, and government investing. Can you tell us more about what all that means?
ESG is really the newest factor in investing, which focuses on environmental, social, and governance. So it's looking at how companies treat their environmental regime, how they're working with things in society or social issues, and then governance, how are they governed, their board structure, things of that nature. And then interestingly enough, the Catholic guidelines, when you overlay what we as Catholics would like to see in a portfolio, if you lay them in sort of a Venn diagram, you actually find that the intersection of the two circles are pretty significant. And we're seeing more and more that this is becoming a bigger deal within the Catholic market, ESG within the broader investment market. And we think that's why it's going to have a lot of staying power as both institutions and individuals think about how to apply these principles to their own investing.
So secular principles and Catholic principles coming together for some really good advice. I understand that congratulations are also in order. The Knights of Columbus International Equity Fund just won its third consecutive Refinitiv Lipper Award for best performance over a 5-year period in its category. Congratulations for that. It shows you give good financial advice. What's the lens you think Catholics should be using to develop this right investment portfolio?
Well, first, I think what the award shows is that you can do it in a Catholic way and do it in a way that still can provide good economic performance. So complying with Catholic teachings doesn't mean that you necessarily have to sacrifice return.
And is there some list out there of these good investments? And do these companies have to be Catholic in their identity or in their missions?
Well, first, I smile because I only wish there was a list that would make our life a lot easier. Unfortunately, I think in a certain sense, investing as a Catholic is really a lot like being a Catholic. So we have to, learn from those that teach us within the faith. So we really have to intuit and understand the things that are being taught by the church and then apply them. But in many cases, they're the things that we viscerally know as being Catholic.
Tony, the backdrop of war makes everyone nervous. With international markets fluctuating wildly, inflation, and soaring gas prices, it's tempting to want to prioritize profit over moral investing. How do you address this?
Well, this is a giant wild card right now, and we've been talking about it, as you can imagine, on a daily basis. We've been in the camp that this inflationary environment that we are in right now was not transitory. And the reason we felt it wasn't transitory is energy prices have been going up, and they've been going up, candidly since Biden became president, Xing out the XL pipeline, making it not definitely difficult in actuality, at least making the environment difficult to obtain licenses to drill on federal lands. So suddenly we went from being a net energy exporter to suddenly we didn't have that luxury anymore. And with the tightness in the labor market, we saw wages going up. And these are not the kinds of transitory things that take care of themselves in a month or two. The reality of it is that as investors, trying to figure out the exact moment to get in the market, it's really difficult. In over 30 years of being involved in the asset management business, I've learned one immutable fact, that I'm smart enough to know that I'm not smart enough to time the markets. It takes a little intestinal fortitude, it takes a little prayer, but you will get to the other side.
Well, it encourages us to keep the faith. Thank you so much, Tony.
Well, thank you for having me.
No matter who your financial advisor is, you can tell them that you want to start incorporating a faith-based approach to the management of your portfolio. The United States Conference of Catholic Bishops issued an expanded version of investment guidelines during the November General Assembly. The 5 broad categories the conference says are important to consider: protecting human life, protecting human dignity, enhancing the common good, pursuing economic justice, and protecting the environment. We'll be right back.
Excited to get on the train, knowing that the Pope is doing this sometimes, so it's a great feeling.
All aboard! The train's departing, and you're invited to go with us. Next. Finally, today at the Vatican, a sign of spring and a return to normalcy after 2 years of COVID lockdown. Last weekend, the Barberini Gardens at Castel Gandolfo reopened to the public. And what better way to get there than with a special train ride from the tiny train station at the Vatican City? We travel along with reporter Colin Flynn.
We are inside the walls of Vatican City, the smallest nation in the world, for what is going to be a very special day. We are walking through the stunning Vatican museums, surrounded by incredible art. But this is not why we are here. Well, this is so exciting because I'm here at the Vatican train station, the oldest train station in the world, to take a very special journey. For the first time since the pandemic began, the steel door is opened and a train rolls into the Vatican from Italy, passing from one nation to another.
Many families and people from all over the world who will come to Rome will be able to have this experience, immersed in art, immersed in nature, and spend a period, a moment, a day of leisure.
The passengers board the Papal Express, which today will be traveling to the Pope's summer residence at Castel Gandolfo, an hour outside of Rome.
I'm really excited. It's my first time I've ever actually been here. I've never been to Rome, so I think it'll be a really interesting experience, and it has been so far.
Yeah, it's very cool, it's very good organized, and it's very special, yeah.
This would encourage people to go and see other things, and also to start the departure from the Vatican Gardens. This is a very exciting experience.
We've arrived at Castel Gandolfo, the summer papal residence. First, it's a walk through the beautiful papal gardens.
Everyone knows the Vatican Museums, and you're going to go to the Vatican Museums. But broaden your horizons, walk through the gardens, take the train, come up here to Castelli Romani. It is spectacular.
After lunch with fellow passengers, we get to see some fascinating pieces of Vatican history, like the various Pope-mobiles used over the years. And then, the highlight of the day, a rare glimpse inside the Vatican Summer Papal Palace. Along the walls hang portraits of previous popes who stayed here during the summer months and were shown the private chapel they used, the office they studied in, even the papal bedroom. It's a little-known piece of the Vatican with incredible art and history that the public are now able to visit by train through the Vatican Museums. In Rome, Colin Flynn for EWTN News In Depth.
That does it for this edition of EWTN News In Depth. I'm Montse Alvarado. Next week at this time, watch for special EWTN Good Friday and Easter programming. We'll be back again the following week with in-depth news and issues affecting your Catholic life. See you then.